Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the 2019 Academy Award nominations, which took place this morning. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
I love that we're getting a different sign-on from you every single day. How many days of 2019 do you think that you'll be able to keep this up?
I'll probably give it up soon. You're
already over it?
Yeah.
You guys woke up very early this morning to, huddle in the virtual Slash Film newsroom to cover the Oscar nominations. When did those hit this morning?
5:22 a.m. Pacific time.
Only 8:22 Eastern time, so I was already up. But yeah, it was bright and early for the rest of the country.
Yeah, we have a whole listing of all the nominations on the site, thanks to you guys. And so if you want to read all the nominations, you can go there. I will link that in the show notes. But I want to go through the major categories first. Let's go through the major categories and talk about some surprises. Actually, does anybody have Best Picture category in front of them that they could read what the Best Pictures are?
I do.
Yes. Jacob, could you tell us what was nominated for Best Picture?
Black Panther, Black Klansman, Bohemian Rhapsody, The Favorite, Green Book, Roma, A Star is Born, and Vice.
So what are the surprises here?
One of the surprises here is Black Panther, and I feel like in one way it's not a surprise because it's spent the past couple months getting nominated at all kinds of different awards, all kinds of different guilds have been nominating Black Panther. But I think people were still kind of expecting it to get shut out at the Oscars because this is 10 years ago, as we'll discuss in a little bit, The Dark Knight was not nominated for Best Picture and set off this whole chain reaction of when will a superhero movie ever get nominated for Best Picture? Will it ever happen? Will it ever happen? And everyone thought that Marvel Studios movie was not going to break that mold, and here we are. It actually did it. And I think a lot of people are going to... I think the big debate going forward will be, is the Black Panther nomination more about the movie or more about the moment, the cultural, shift that it represents? And either way, I think it belongs here. But yeah, I'm still pleasantly surprised that a Marvel movie, albeit one that is incredibly smart and rich and textured in its storytelling and character, is here, and that's very cool.
And Chris, you wrote this feature on the site, basically chronicling the last 10 years, talking about the Dark Knight snub. Can you give that a plug?
I sure can. So, yeah, I think everyone at this point knows that 10 years ago, 2008, really, everyone sort of assumed the Dark Knight was going to get a Best Picture nomination because it was, at the time, one of the best reviewed comic book movies. It was a serious film. Everyone thought, oh, this is it. This is going to break through, and become that first comic book / superhero movie nominated for Best Picture. And it wasn't. It got 8 nominations. One of those was, of course, Heath Ledger, who won posthumously for his work as the Joker. But that still wasn't good enough for a lot of people, and there was a kind of backlash. And the Academy actually took that to heart. And the next year...
Yeah, but this caused a lot of trouble in the coming years. I feel like it was probably more bad than good.
I don't want to speculate that far, but I know that, the next year, the Academy bumped their nominations up from 5 to 10. And at the time, the Academy president even said... he said the quote is something like, "I'd be lying if I said The Dark Knight didn't play a decision in this." So, but even with that in mind, it still took another 10 years before any comic book movie ended up with a Best Picture nomination. And here we are with Black Panther.
Yeah, it took a while. HT, what got snubbed in this category?
Well, I think the biggest snub that we can say here is If Beale Street Could Talk, directed by Barry Jenkins, who won 2 years ago for Moonlight. for Best Picture, rather. And he was also snubbed in the Best Director category as well. But this was a film that was critically acclaimed. People expected it to be in the contention for Best Picture, but it ended up not getting very many nominations. I think it received only 3 nominations total for this film, including Best Supporting Actress for Regina King and a Best Adapted Screenplay.
And I know you guys didn't have this on your list, but if I was totally awake at this time, I would have put Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse here. Not that anybody thought that it was going to get nominated for Best Picture. Like, I don't think even the filmmaker, I don't think anybody was disillusioned in that standpoint. But I really feel like with this many nominations, that film should be recognized.
Yeah, actually, the one thing I want to say that you kind of suggested when talking about the backlash to Dark Knight and the expanding of the categories, one thing that irks me in the years since is that it never is the same amount of Best Picture nominations. It's sometimes 10. This year it was only 8. So I feel like they could have just keep it at 10 and include films like Into the Spider-Verse or If Beale Street Could Talk.
Yeah, I strongly feel that if Sony had known that Spider-Verse would get the reaction that did, if they were aware that it was going to be that tremendous of a reaction from regular folks and critics, I think they would have launched a campaign or have gotten multiple Oscar nominations in sound, score, even writing possibly. But I think Sony learned too little, too late what they had in their hands.
Let's talk about some of the acting categories. Let's start with Best Actor. HT, what is the surprise here?
So a pleasant surprise rather, is Willem Dafoe for At Eternity's Gate. So this was a performance that was breathtaking for the people who saw it. And he definitely carried this film, which is a little slight, as the portraying the legendary Vincent van Gogh in his final years. And this film, I think, is really gorgeous, but it kind of lost a lot of buzz after its release in September. And while Willem Dafoe was great in it, he didn't have quite the momentum that other Best Actor candidates had. But he is great in it, so this was a nice surprise. And it's also a back-to-back nomination for him because he was nominated last year for Best Supporting Actor in The Florida Project.
That is a surprise. Chris, who was snubbed here?
Sorry, I didn't have the thing open.
Chris, who was snubbed in this category?
Ethan Hawke was snubbed, in my opinion. I pretty much saw the writing on the wall at this point because he wasn't getting as much love in the awards leading up to the Oscars either, which really surprised me. But I kept holding out hope because I honestly think this is the best performance he's ever given. And I'm not saying that lightly because I think he's given a lot of really good performances. He's almost always 100% in there. He never phones a performance in, but this was it felt like the culmination of all of his work so far. And it felt like this was it. This was finally his moment to at least get the nomination, and he didn't. And I don't really get it. I guess the movie is just too dark and too, even though it got that Best Screenplay nomination, I just think it's too challenging and too weird for most voters.
It's interesting. Mark Harris on Twitter was talking about how the range of nominees here, ranging from really bold, surprising choices to the most mundane choices possible, like Green Book, represent a very clear split between all the new members who've been added in the past few years and the old guard, in a way that it's very clearly illustrative now that the Academy is split into two different camps.
So speaking of sort of the camps divided in the Academy, I feel like both camps probably overlooked Hugh Grant's performance in Paddington 2, which, because it was in a family film, but in not only one of the best family films of last year, but one of the best films of last year. So Hugh Grant gave a just hysterical, vanity-free performance in Paddington 2 that I feel like was so sorely overlooked in the awards discussions, despite him earning a BAFTA nomination and even winning at the London Film and Critics Circle Awards. But I feel that goodwill towards his performance didn't seem to survive the trip across the Atlantic, and he has earned nothing. And plus, Paddington 2 came out early in 2018, so it might have gotten forgotten during the awards discussions. And another one that was definitely overlooked was Brian Tyree Henry, who actually earned buzz for not one but two performances in critically acclaimed films this year. First in Widows as a crime boss, and then in If Beale Street Could Talk as a sort of cheery ex-con. Both of them, he had sort of minimal screen time, but he left such an impact that fans and critics alike were calling for him to earn a Best Supporting Actor nod for either film.
Let's talk about actresses. Actually, I'm a little confused here because the Queen from The Favorite was nominated for Best Actress, but Weiss and Stone were nominated for Supporting?
Yeah, it's actually it's one of those tactics you see very often where there's a ensemble cast, and even though technically people are leads, they strategically nominate themselves for supporting. If all three had nominated themselves for Best Actress, maybe one of them would have gotten in, but this way, all three of the favorites' leads got nominated. It's sly and probably not ethical, but you start to see it more and more often these days.
But all three deserve it, so I'm not too upset about it, even if the categorization is a little bit wonky.
Let's talk about what is the biggest surprise in the female acting categories, Chris.
All right, I'm going to get shit for this because I'm going to mispronounce their names I apologize terribly because I'm a dumb American. But Yalitza Aparicio from Roma, and also Marina Di Tavira from Roma. And again, I sincerely apologize if I mispronounce both those names. But they're both phenomenal in Roma, especially the lead. And this was literally her first acting role ever. But even though they're both really good, I had just sort of assumed they wouldn't get it. They would just be overlooked. Maybe because their performances aren't in English, and maybe I just assumed the Academy would just overlook them, but they didn't, and I'm really thrilled about that. I'm thrilled they both got that nomination because they're both so good in the film.
Few choices I think a few months ago maybe we would have expected to get nominated here. I think the best performance of last year overall was Toni Collette in Hereditary, and a lot of people, including some Oscar prognosticators, were saying she could be a dark horse in the Best Actress category, but she's not here, and on one level, it's not the biggest surprise in the world. But I think a lot of people thought that people loved Toni Collette. People thought that A24 would have a better year than they did at the Oscars, but she's not here. Also, Nicole Kidman for Destroyer. That entire movie's marketing campaign, all of its buzz, everything. The movie was built around Nicole Kidman's performance and built around, come see her give the performance of her lifetime, performance of her career. It's an incredible performance. But Destroyer just never got the buzz necessary to really push it over the top. So Nicole Kidman was also left out here. But the biggest snub here is probably Emily Blunt, who had a dual shot at maybe getting nominated for A Quiet Place or getting nominated for Mary Poppins Returns. And she got nominated for neither of them. And there was only a little bit of love for both those films. And I think that people just thought that, that in the year of Emily Blunt, if we made a list of the people who had the greatest 2018, I think Emily Blunt would be in the top three, maybe even number one, because of the amount of success she had with Mary Poppins Returns and A Quiet Place. And to not see her get nominated for either of them in a year that I feel was like the year of the Blunt.
Yeah.
I feel it's very, very strange.
It was definitely a Blunt year, Jacob. We should move on to director. Jacob, do you have the list of directors nominated this year in front of you?
I do indeed. Best Director, Spike Lee, Black Klansman. Pardon me, Polish listeners. Pawel Polakowski, Cold War. Yorgos Lanthimos, The Favorite. Alfonso Cuarón, Roma. And Adam McKay, Vice.
I'm very surprised Ryan Coogler did not get a nomination for Black Panther. I'm almost always surprised when a film gets a Best Picture nom but not a Best Director nomination, because even though, films are the result of, it's a team effort, but the director is, the person who's the head of that team. They're pushing everything forward. And it's always weird to me when this happens, where it's like, yeah, that film was great, but let's not mention the director. So I'm a little surprised that if they were going to go all out and nominate Black Panther, why not nominate Ryan Coogler too? Because Ryan Coogler, in his very short career, has already proven he's the real deal. He's only made 3 films so far, but they've all been like critical raves. So I am a little surprised that he didn't get a nomination.
Yeah, and on that topic, I always felt it was weird that the producers received the Best Picture awards and not the filmmaker. I know that's how it's always been, but like, I don't know. It just seems, I don't know. I don't want to take anything away from.
I guess in theory, it's like without them, the movie wouldn't exist because they paid for it. But yeah, I always felt that was weird too.
I wonder if it's remnant of the Hollywood classic studio system in which directors were more workhorses than the producers.
Yeah. What else in the Best Director? Like, Jacob, I know you were talking about Bradley Cooper.
Yeah, I think Bradley Cooper is as glaring as Black Panther and Ryan Coogler because, A Star is Born has been like one of the front-runner favorites since the middle of last year. And the Academy traditionally loves actors turned directors. Like, they give Robert Redford and Kevin Costner and all these people like tons of awards the moment an actor says, I want to direct. And Star is Born is also a good movie. It's a well-directed movie for the most part. So him not being here, even though A Star is Born got 8 nominations, is very strange. It's not like they snubbed Bradley Cooper. He's nominated for Best Actor. He's nominated for his work on the screenplay, and he's a producer, so he's nominated for Best Picture. So he is doing quite well. He has a reason to celebrate today. But Bradley Cooper not being here is very strange, especially since this is one of the frontrunners, one of the big movies, and I think that there are directors on this list who shouldn't be here when Bradley Cooper should be. But but you know what? I guess I'm just shocked that the Academy did not see an opportunity to nominate an actor for directing because it's happened so often.
Yeah. This is probably one of the biggest snubs for me. Like, I didn't even love that movie, but like his directorial debut, like, it was just so impressive. But at least Peter Farrelly was not nominated in his place, right, Chris?
Yes, this is technically a snub, but it's a snub I'm okay with. Yeah, Peter Farrelly or Farrelly, however it's pronounced, he directed Green Book, and Green Book has been having quite an award season where it's racking up awards, even though the residents of film Twitter seem to be outraged at this. And so it sort of seemed like a given that he was going to get this Best Director nomination, but he didn't. And I don't know if that's because that article came out that revealed in the past he would expose himself as a quote unquote joke, but maybe that played a part. And yet at the same time, the screenwriter got into a lot of hot water too for his comments, but he got nominated. So I don't really know how this happened, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah, so director Pavel Pawlikowski earned a surprising Best Director nod, which is unusual because the Best Director category doesn't usually contain 2 foreign film directors. And here we have Pawlikowski as well as Alfonso Cuarón. And this is a film that flew under a lot of people's radars, even people who are major cinephiles, because it's a black and white romance, period drama, and not a lot of people have seen it, but the people who have raved about it. But it hasn't earned any sort of buzz in any case. And yet here it is in one of the top 5 categories with the director earning that coveted Best Director nod.
Yeah, I'm really shocked by this because I feel like this was not in the buzz at all leading up to this awards. Like, this wasn't even on my like watch list for, before I was, making my top 10 of the year. This wasn't even on my radar. Has anybody here seen that film?
Nope.
Yeah, I want to because I've heard nothing but good things about it, but I just have not had the time.
And to give you an idea,
skip my screening.
Yeah, and to give you an idea, Chris has seen almost 400 films from last year and has not seen this film. So that just goes to show you how much of a surprise that is. But a big snub this year in directing category is there's no female Best Director nominees.
Yeah, so if you heard Jacob's rundown of the Best Director category earlier, you may notice that there are no female directors nominated. And while people may argue that female filmmakers are not doing any awards-worthy work, I beg you to reconsider, because I think that this year has had some of the most visibility for female directors doing great work in the indie and film festival circuit. You have Lynn Ramsey with the thriller You Were Never Really Here, Deborah Granick for Leave No Trace, and Marielle Heller for Can You Ever Forgive Me, which also earned 3 Oscar nominations for Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Screenplay. And yet she did not earn a Best Director nomination when she could have feasibly gotten that 5th slot. There are plenty of others too. Chloe Zhao for The Writer, which was critically acclaimed and was named the year's best film by the National Society of Film Critics and the Gotham Film Awards. Josie Rourke, who's Mary Queen of Scots, also earned 2 Oscar nods. Tamara Jenkins for Private Life, Karen Kusama for Destroyer, Mimi Letter for On the Basis of Sex. There's so many.
Wow, this sounds like a long list, HT.
Yeah.
Like, long list of ignored. At my critic circle, the Los Angeles Online Film Critics circle, we do like, instead of best director, we do best male director and best female director, which we kind of got a lot of flack last year when we introduced that. But I was actually not sure how I felt about it back then. But I actually now kind of love that, because I feel like, yes, in a best world, there should just be one category. Actually, in the best world, there shouldn't even be best actress, best actor, I think. But we're not living in that best world. We have Trump as president. I don't know. I almost wish instead of, the Academy considering best popular film as a category, they might consider, breaking up best male director and best female director, so that, something needs to be done to get the recognition and to start turning the tide, in my opinion. Like, what do you think of that?
I also have mixed feelings about dividing that category, because I do think that if people just looked harder and actually were able to see that female filmmakers are doing great work, that this category would be more evenly balanced. But Greta Gerwig was nominated last year, and there have only been 5 women nominated in total at the Oscars. So maybe it would be worth it at this point just to jumpstart things, or just throw out all the old guard and have everyone new just take over the Academy.
Get rid of all the old people. I don't think that's going to happen. But you can read HT's entire write-up of this. It's titled More Female Directors Were Worthy of a Best Picture Nod Than Ever, but Got Shut Out of the Oscars. I will put the link in the show notes. Moving away from the major 4 categories, let's talk about other snubs.
Here's a fun fact for you. Suicide Squad has more Oscars than the entire country of South Korea. South Korea has 0 Oscar nominations, and it seemed like this year would be the turning point for that after Lee Chang-dong's Burning started to gain buzz in the film festival circuit again, and was gaining momentum to be South Korea's first foreign language film nomination. It was the first Korean film to make it onto the Oscar shortlist for foreign language film. And yet it has been shut out, despite a great chilling performance by supporting actor Steven Yeun, who's also Asian American and was supposed to be kind of the extra boost for this film. But Burning is not in this category, unfortunately.
And another shutout, First Man. I know this is a film that both Brad and Jacob, I think, were big fans of, is completely shut out of the major categories.
Yeah, if you told me a year ago this would happen, I wouldn't have believed you, because I think that Academy Award winner Damien Chazelle coming off La La Land, making a Neil Armstrong biopic starring Ryan Gosling, sounds like a recipe for Best Picture. And co-starring Claire Foy, but no director nomination, no picture nomination, no acting nominations. Has visual effects, production design, and a few other technical awards nominated for. But it has just been completely left out of the Oscar race. I think this movie was not what people thought it was going to be. It's a far quieter, more meditative movie than your typical, spacefaring biopic. And it's never really struck the chord it needed to. I think reaction is a little too mixed. I love this movie. I think Times can be very kind to it. But seeing it not nominated for anything is deeply strange after I spent pretty much most of last year thinking it would be a Star is Born versus First Man showdown at the Oscars.
Yeah, and we did talk a little bit about Cold War. This is a kind of a big surprise. It wasn't just nominated for Best Director, but it also got a bunch of other nominations. Chris, what is going on here?
It got a nomination for Best Cinematography, which I don't think is that much of a surprise. It's because the Academy really likes things that are in black and white. It's like they see that and they're like, "Oh my God, what is this? Something in black and white?" So, I think that's what.
Cold War also got a nomination from the American Society of Cinematographers.
It reminds the old Academy voters of their childhood filmmaking or film-going experiences.
Back in the day of the talkies when they went to the Nickelodeon. But Cold War also looks, I mean, from what I've seen it based on the trailer, it looks gorgeous. So I don't think that's too big of a surprise. I think the biggest surprise is Never Look Away, which is a German film, and all of us, when these nominations were being announced, were like, what the hell is Never Look Away? Because I've honestly never heard of this film, or if I did hear of it, it slipped my mind completely. And yeah, so Never Look Away, like I said, it's a German film. It got a Best Cinematography nod, so good for you, Never Look Away.
Let's talk about Best Makeup. There's a couple surprises here. Jacob, I know you wrote about all of them on the site. You were a big fan of Border, and this was snubbed?
Oh, no, Border was actually nominated for
it
Best
was nominated,
Makeup.
Sorry.
Yeah, and it's like, the fact that I'm imagining all these stodgy old Academy members watching Border, it makes me happy. It's a supernatural romance. It's very, very, very good, and it features some very, very impressive subtle makeup that lets the actors who are playing, let's say, non-humans in the movie really emote and have performances. And the fact that it made in makeup, against lots of major Hollywood movies that would have been up for this award is very cool and very impressive. And even though it's a single nomination, I hope it encourages people to put Border on their radar. But the snub here, I guess maybe it's not too surprising since the movie was not necessarily a box office darling, but Suspiria didn't get a makeup nomination despite making the final round of finalists. And this is a movie where, in addition to all kinds of gnarly practical effects, the makeup lets Tilda Swinton play three characters. She plays a bloated, ancient, evil witch, and she plays an 80-something-year-old man. And they're both incredibly convincing makeup effects, and it's really, really excellent stuff. I think maybe the fact that Suspiria is a horror movie, and so much of the movie is grisly, and it is slow, and it is odd and weird, may have thrown off some more traditional Academy voters, because I think that in terms of pure technique, it may be the most impressive makeup I saw last year.
Yeah, it's tough to make sense of this because Border is a horror film, right?
That's horror elements. I'd say it's more fantasy than horror, but it is a deeply weird movie. So it's the fact that it got nominated and Suspiria didn't is definitely odd.
Speaking of dark and odd movies, First Reformed was, like Chris said, very challenging and very out of the box for what the Academy usually considers. And yet Paul Schrader was nominated for his First Reformed screenplay. So this was a pleasant surprise because no one really expected First Reformed to become an awards darling. But it is possible because Paul Schrader is the legendary screenwriter behind Martin Scorsese's classics like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, that he kind of has that legacy behind him. And the Academy was just like, who can we nominate for Best Original Screenplay? Oh, there's Paul Schrader. I don't know what that movie is about, but let's do it.
We are going long on this podcast. I want to talk about a couple more of these snubs. I think the biggest in my mind is I'm really surprised that Won't You Be My Neighbor was shut out of Best Documentary. Jacob, can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is odd because Won't You Be My Neighbor, people love this movie. It has got great reviews. It played at Sundance to rave responses and continued to play throughout all of last year. It started this sort of mini Mr. Rogers renaissance, and people talking Mr. Rogers again. And it made $22 million at the box office, which is huge for a documentary. And up until a month ago, I would have said this movie would win. And the director, Morgan Neville, he's an Oscar winner. His previous film, 20 Feet from Stardom, won the Best Documentary Oscar in 2014. So it has Oscar written all over it. I do not know what happened. Some really good docs like Mind the Gap and Free Solo were nominated, so it's not like there's no taste on display here. But I feel like this was a shoo-in. I'm shocked this wasn't nominated.
Yeah, and another surprise is Can You Ever Forgive Me?
Can You Forgive Me landed 3 Oscar nominations, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. And this movie, I think people saw Richard E. Grant getting Best Supporting Actor coming. It's like, but McCarthy getting Best Actress and the Adapted Screenplay Oscar, it's really nice to see a movie that not a lot of people saw, but those people who did see it really connected to it. I'm happy to see this here. I'm hoping it encourages more people to seek out one of the most underrated and underseen films of last year.
And Chris, I know you are upset over the omission, even in all the technical nods for Mission Impossible.
Yeah, I'm very surprised. I was under no illusions that Mission Impossible would get, like Best Picture or anything like that, but from a technical standpoint, this movie is, I don't want to say flawless, but the effects and the action and the staging, the editing, all of it is so top notch. And for it to be just like completely ignored is very surprising to me. I thought at least it would get one technical nod. It didn't get anything at all. So I don't get it.
One thing I wanted to talk about is AMC theaters and Regal cinemas do this thing where they do their Best Picture showcase, and they show all the movies that are nominated for Best Picture. And, leading up to this, we were wondering what would happen if, Roma is actually nominated. Will this Netflix film actually screen at AMC theaters? And Brad, you wrote this up for the site. Like, what is going to happen?
Yeah, so at least three of the major movie theater chains, AMC Theaters, Regal Cinemas, and Cinemark, who all have their own Best Picture showcases after the nominees are announced so that audiences can catch up on the nominees before the actual Oscars broadcast. They won't be including Roma in their Best Picture showcases. You'll be able to see all the other 7 nominees, but Roma will not be included among them. Regal and Cinemark have been kind of shy about calling attention to this, but AMC Theaters released a short statement to Deadline explaining why this is the case. And they said, quote, "For more than a decade, movie lovers have enjoyed the AMC Best Picture Showcase to catch up on the nominated films that played at AMC throughout the prior year. This year, Academy members nominated a film that was never licensed to AMC to play in our theaters. As such, it is not included in the AMC Best Picture Showcase." So, first of all, I love that they don't even mention the film by title as like, we're not even going to talk about a Netflix movie. But second of all, this feels like kind of a cop-out because the only reason that the movie isn't licensed to play in AMC theaters is because they didn't want to play with Netflix and follow their rules to release it. And this is also a movie theater chain that has constantly clashed with Netflix about how much they're closing the window between theatrical release and making a movie available on streaming or home video. So this really is just a convenient opportunity for AMC to be like, well, you know what? Screw Netflix. We're not going to show their movies. But at the same time, Roma's playing on Netflix. So you don't need to go pay it to see in theaters anyway. So just watch it at home, even though it's worth seeing on the big screen. You don't have to go out of your way to see it in theaters. And you don't have to go pay for a ticket to see the showcase to catch it in theaters. You can just catch any of the other movies that are part of the Best Picture Showcase instead.
It's just a shame that the majority of people out there that aren't in major cities are never going to get a chance to see this film on the big screen. Also, the Razzie nominations came out. I know we all think those are important and worth talking about. Brad, you did a roundup for the site. What did the Razzies get right and what did the Razzies get wrong?
I mean, the Razzies pretty much get everything wrong now just because it's just not even fun to punch down and knock all these movies out that we already know are bad. And they've kind of taken it to a new level this year, to a frustrating sense, because obviously movies like Gotti, Holmes and Watson, The Happy Time Murders, they all rounded up 6 nominations in categories like Worst Picture, Worst Actor, Worst Actress, that kind of thing. But they also decided to take some shots at just the real world happenings by giving Dinesh D'Souza's right-wing documentary Death of a Nation nomination, and then also they included the likes of Donald Trump and Kellyanne Conway and Melania Trump as quote-unquote actor nominees for their role as the subjects of Michael Moore's documentary Fahrenheit 11/9. And to me, that just seems like, unnecessary. As much as I love any jabs taken at the Trump administration and any of the clowns who follow that orange circus around, this just seems just unnecessary, and no one really cares anymore from what I can tell. So it is what it is. It's the Razzies doing what they do by trying to call attention to the worst movies, but anymore it just feels lazy when they nominate all these movies and actors and actresses.
Yeah. Why Winchester? Why do they hate Winchester so much? It's not that bad. It's not that great, but it's such a weird thing to, in a year full of terrible movies, to say, here's a January horror movie that wasn't as bad as most things released last year, and then like just give it 6 nominations. I freaking hate these awards. They're so stupid.
Who even votes on the Razzies? Do we know?
Idiots.
Okay.
Actual raspberries.
I mean, that's making more sense now. Okay. Is there anything else that we left out of this Oscar nomination discussion that any of you guys want to mention? Brad, I know you didn't really get a chance to talk because you didn't write up this, you weren't part of this biggest Oscar snubs and surprises article.
Yeah, I was up this morning in the madness, and I helped with the snubs list, but then I went back to bed because it was early in the time zone that I'm in right now.
Yeah, so is there anything you want to say about the nominations?
There's one thing that I want to say, and it's not. I talked to Jacob and the team about including this on the article, but we decided not to, simply because it's not technically a snub. But I just want to put it out there, just because. I think Jesse Plemons should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Game Night because his performance is every bit as good comedically as Melissa McCarthy's was in Bridesmaids. And even though he wasn't ever really in the conversation, I feel like he would have been totally deserving of it if they would have made the push for him to get a nomination.
Yeah.
I also wanted to give a shout out to Eighth Grade, which got surprisingly completely shut out of the Oscars. I thought at least that it would get a Best Original Screenplay nod for director Bo Burnham, and also his directorial debut. In another world, maybe he'd get a Best Director nod as well. And also Elsie Fisher, who was sort of in the conversation for Best Actress, and would have been a very young but very deserving nomination.
Yeah,
I could rewrite the. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, I'm personally very upset that Eighth Grade didn't get any love.
I want to use my universe-altering powers and erase Viggo Mortensen from Best Actor list and just toss in Nicolas Cage from Mandy to spice things up.
Yeah, all those old Academy voters, they're going to vote for that, sure. Before we go, I want to plug some stuff that's on the site because we got some good articles on the site right now. Earlier this week, when did we do this? No, it was last week that we did our most anticipated new television shows of 2019 writers' room discussion on the podcast. Well, the article is finally up on the site and we have a ranking. So, and somehow Star Wars is not number one. I don't know. So go to the site and find out what is. I will link in the show notes. Jacob, what do you want to plug?
I also want to add on what Peter said there. The number 1 and 2 items on that list were tied and was broken through a very heated discussion in our Slash Film Slack. So as you read those, you can, if you want to, you can imagine that 1 and 2 share the same spot. But I'm going to talk about, we ran a spoiler review for Glass by frequent Slash Film contributor Josh Spiegel, and he essentially breaks down why the movie does not work and why the third act destroys the legacy of Unbreakable in ways that he found like deeply irritating. And he's not even like a huge M. Night fan. He just even a huge Unbreakable fan, and he was like really deeply bothered by where that movie went. It's a very, very good article, full of spoilers, but you should check that out after you see the movie.
On the opposite end of the spectrum with Glass, as part of our recurring unpopular opinion feature, we have Britt Hayes giving a passionate defense of Glass, calling it a bold and brilliant climax to M. Night Shyamalan's superhero trilogy.
It is interesting because critics seem to dislike this movie, and it seems like general audiences seem to be liking it more. I'm not going to say loving it, but it seemed to be a little bit more forgiving. So it's interesting to read Britt's take on this. HT, what do you have to plug?
I'm plugging another Josh Spiegel article. He's writing a lot for us this week, in which he rounded out the 10 greatest M. Night Shyamalan scenes, some of which take place in not so beloved movies like The Happening, but still have still deserve a place in this top 10 scenes by this director.
And Chris, you have a feature on the site today, right?
That's right. Every 2 weeks, I run a Blu-ray review roundup where I just, I gather together all the physical media releases of the week or the week to follow, and I break down the special features. I break down, the film itself. So please go give that a read. This week it features Suspiria, Bad Times at the El Royale, the great new Arrow video release of Crimson Peak, Criterion's release of Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious, and one of my favorite films, the 1990s thriller Judgment Night, which is on Blu-ray for the very first time ever right now.
So you can find links to all those stories, including all our Oscar coverage on /film.com and linked in the show notes. You can find this podcast, /Film Daily, published every weekday on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to Peter at /film.com. Please head over to our iTunes page. Give us 5 stars, write us a sentence or two. Tell your friends. Spread the word. And we'll see you tomorrow.